going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. April's over, which means it's time for another monthly wrap-up where I rank all the new releases that I saw from worst to best. Before we begin, let me know in the comments what your favorite movies were this month as well as your least favorite. As always, this is just my list and not a definitive ranking. Also, make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you like these videos, as it helps me out immensely by getting my channel out there. And if you're new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with reviews of new releases, older films, hidden gems, and so much more on a near daily basis. Now, for some of these, I am going to be a little bit quicker about than others, as I saw 32 new releases this month, and if I go in depth on all of them, we'll be here all day. As usual, there will be some films from earlier in the year that I'm also including on this list, but I also want to let you know that for the last weekend of this month, I was busy for most of it, so I did not get to check out movies like The Mitchells vs. the Machines or Without Remorse. So those, along with some others, will get included in my May wrap-up video, as there was just no time to get them in. But let's not waste any more time, and let's talk about the movies I did see. In last place is Deadly Illusions, a film that borders on so bad it's good territory with its mix of soap opera-like melodrama and a Fatal Attraction-style thriller, and it just does not come together in a coherent way whatsoever. The story's all over the place, with each and every scenario being this question of did it or did it not happen, which is a trope already done to death and comes off as nothing but annoying here. Plus, the dialogue is way too on the nose and is stuffed with exposition. Characters undergo very bizarre and drastic personality shifts, the acting's not all that great, and it all leads to one of the most laughably bad third acts I've seen in quite some time. Easily one of the worst movies I've seen this year so far. At number 31 is Vanquish, a movie that puts in so little effort that it's yet another one I found to be pretty funny for all the wrong reasons. For nearly all of its 96-minute runtime, it's dead set on sticking to this one formula and almost never deviates from it. So much that all the actors clearly come off like they're reciting all of their lines. And then the characters will make bizarre decisions that clearly had no logic behind them, yet it feels like one long bad improv session where everyone goes along with it like it's all supposed to be totally normal, even when someone clearly contradicts themselves. It was very obviously a paycheck movie for everyone involved, and outside of maybe some unintentional laughs, it is not worth your time. At number 30 is Held, a movie that I really wanted to like, for its fun concept alone, but I found it to be a bit of a chore. I think it needed to go more for this silly B-movie vibe, because some of the setups here just come off as ridiculous, yet they're played totally serious and melodramatic, and it just didn't mesh well together, especially when we get to a borderline ludicrous twist in the third act. On top of all that, the really bad acting becomes grating after a while, along with the fact that I felt some of the dramatic beats can be seen coming from a mile away. Altogether, it just deflated any tension for me and made this movie quite the mess in my opinion. At number 29 is Boogie, a basketball movie that basically plays out like your average sports drama, just with one of the world's most unlikable people front and center, making for a grating 90 minutes. While this does have some interesting themes at its core, those moments are often undermined and feel like an afterthought, as most of the film is stuffed to the brim with characters getting into nothing but nasty, aggressive confrontations with each other, with rarely anything remotely nice being put in to balance things out. And what little moments we do get don't feel earned. While thematically it was nice, themes alone can't make a movie, so had the characters been improved, it would have clicked so much more. At number 28 is Beast Beast, a coming-of-age drama that seems well-intentioned, trying to tackle the theme of gun violence, but the problem is the film seems way more interested in painting a fleshed-out three-dimensional picture of the person here perpetuating that violence and nothing else. And while I'm all for three-dimensional characters, I take issue with the fact that that's the only character in this film portrayed with any sort of nuance, while everyone else is portrayed as very bland or really uninteresting, acting only in service of this troubled gunman character's arc in the final half hour. So I found that to be incredibly tone-deaf, and in a way, it works against the message this film's going for. At number 27 is Thunder Force, another Melissa McCarthy, Ben Falcone comedy that's mostly void of laughter. This was painfully unfunny for the most part, relying on gags that weren't great to begin with, that then go on for way longer than they needed to, usually relying on characters making the worst possible decisions they could ever make. It has a great cast, with Jason Bateman providing a fair amount of legitimate laughs as this Crabman, but for the most part, they all go to waste, and we get an unimaginative, lazily written mess. At number 26 is A Week Away, Netflix's version of High School Musical, but taking place in a Christian summer camp. It's well-intentioned, and that's fine, but that's also not enough. The problem is, we never know what this movie's ultimate point is. It's so laid back and carefree that it's almost devoid of any conflict whatsoever after the first few minutes. And that may have been somewhat forgivable if at least what we got in its place was somewhat entertaining. But what we instead get is a romance that doesn't seem convincing, corny jokes that don't land, and songs that feel very overpolished and obviously auto-tuned that they repeatedly take you out of the moment. Now, its attempt at a feel-good tone might be enough for you, but for me, it didn't work at all. At number 25 is Monday, a look at this toxic relationship following two characters who bring each other down and also get on your absolute nerves very quickly. While I understand that the point of movies like these is to show us how our two lead characters aren't right for each other, we never get any moments where we feel legitimately happy for them, so that it makes their fight feel heartbreaking. The performances by Sebastian Stan and Denise Gough are fine, but their two characters aren't believable together at all, and the scenarios are so annoyingly repetitive and borderline nonsensical that you'll lose your patience very quickly. It's an empty movie that accomplishes nothing but dragging you down. At number 24 is Things Heard and Seen, a horror movie that incorporates soap opera-like elements as it balances a story about a haunted house with a story about a marriage falling apart. And I know a few people quite enjoy this one, but it didn't really work for me. I love the direction, the atmosphere was solid, Amanda Seyfried's performance was very good, but the film went in way too many different directions, and I found the pacing to be extremely sluggish. And the way it comes together, it's less emotionally satisfying and more just a breath of relief that it's over, at least for me. If you liked it, I am glad to hear, but it's nothing I'd want to revisit. At number 23 is The Unholy, a religious horror movie produced by Sam Raimi that's nowhere near as clever as any of the movies Raimi himself directed. It had some intriguing elements thrown in there, but the film forgoes having any sort of message or compelling characters, and instead subjects us to non-stop jump scares that will be extremely aggressive to the point that they're annoying. It's a very predictable movie that you can call from a mile away. The only thing that makes it bearable is the fact that its cast is great, and you have very talented actors elevating bland, generic dialogue into something tolerable. That being said, while they're good here, it's not enough to save this movie. At number 22 is The Banishing, a Shudder original based on experiences at an actual supposedly haunted house, and this did get some critical praise when it played the festival circuit last year, but I just couldn't get into this. Like a few other slow burn horror movies we've got this year, it does at least get the atmosphere down right, and it can be pretty creepy, but the dull characterization held me back from really enjoying it. The supporting performances were a little scene-chewing, but the main characters themselves are completely uninteresting. And when you have that, combined with a slower-paced story, it just makes for a very underwhelming experience. At number 21 is Boys from County Hell, the most disappointing entry on this list, as it's a film that I was almost sure I'd like way more than most of the films on here. It was easily one of my more anticipated movies of this month, but the final product is incredibly jumbled. I think in its attempts to balance out a zany horror comedy with this bold new take on the vampire genre, it didn't lean into either side enough, and thus it left a lot to be desired in both areas. Now, this doesn't seem to be the popular take, as I know a lot of people came away from really liking this. Maybe I just wasn't in the mood for whatever this ended up being, so I might have to give it a shot at some point or another down the line. But for now, while it does a few cool things, I wasn't overly impressed, which is a shame because this is the sort of movie I'd normally gravitate towards. At number 20 is City of Lies, a very ambitious film about the investigation of Tupac and Biggie Smalls' murders that, like a few other films here, I wanted to like more. And it's not even a really bad movie, but it's only as engaging as your interest in the case itself. Because when the film goes into that stuff, it's interesting, but its attempts at character development, while appreciated, just don't work because of how they only scratch the surface with all these characters, and as a result, it brings this movie down. It's honestly a commendable effort, but I'd say that it should have either been a documentary, or if they wanted to do a narrative, it should have been a miniseries. At number 19 is Concrete Cowboy, and again, this isn't really a bad movie as it had its heart in the right place, and it's also meant to bring attention to a real group in Philadelphia known as the Fletcher Street Urban Writing Club, but beyond an excellent performance by Idris Elba, this just didn't grab me. It's a coming-of-age drama chronicling the relationship between Elba and his son, and it plays out just like every other movie that's dealt with similar subject matter. It hits a ton of familiar beats, all of which pop up at the exact moments you'd expect them to, and some of its scenes play out like a corny Hallmark movie at times. As I said, it's well-intentioned, and it didn't do anything necessarily awful, so for that, it'll have its audience, but for me, I wanted something much more than what we got. At number 18 is Chaos Walking, which I was really expecting to like a lot less, but it's surprisingly more tolerable than I was led to believe. It manages to be both intriguing and a wasted opportunity at the same time. It's not so much that the dramatic beats themselves are bad, it's just the fact that you learn next to nothing about this world as well as these characters, letting an A-list cast go almost completely to waste, outside of Tom Holland. The fact you had such a talented cast and crew is what saves this from being flat out bad, at least for me, but this should have been way, way better. And it's nothing I care to watch again soon. At number 17 is The Power, and these next few I thought were at least decent. This is a haunted hospital movie with some social commentary thrown in there about power structures in the workplace, and I thought it was fine. While all the performances were pretty solid, the thing is, we follow around a pretty bland main character who comes off as way too perfect, which doesn't make her journey feel like it has much weight. That being said, after an exposition-heavy first half, things do get interesting in the second half, with some solid direction by Corinna Faith and some eerie imagery that I liked. It's intriguing enough, and it all comes together in a decent enough way. I just think it could have packed more of a punch than it did, but it's fine for what it is. At number 16 is In the Earth, and I gotta say, Ben Wheatley has been a very hit-and-miss director for me, and while this is one of his more watchable movies, this hasn't completely won me over on him yet. Now, like I said, it's watchable. It has some really engaging moments of thrills and suspense. It's shot beautifully, and we do have a few energetic characters in the supporting cast that brought this movie up whenever we're focused on them. But it's one of those films that tries to be way too cryptic and force you to watch it multiple times in order to get a satisfying experience. Had it come together in that ending, I would have had an easier time recommending it. But at best, I'd say proceed with caution. At number 15 is Mortal Kombat, a film that does deliver on the R-rated bloody violence that we want to see from a Mortal Kombat movie, and is very entertaining when it's focused on those moments. But it's also a bit of a chore to get through when it's focused on just about anything else that's not the fighting. I'm not even really asking for much when it comes to action-oriented movies like this, because I know that's not really what we go to them for. But it's one of those movies that asks you to kind of take it seriously whenever it wasn't focused on the fighting. Yet it's focused on the most bland, uninteresting characters we couldn't care less about. And if you're going to give us a movie that you want us to take seriously, all I ask is that they're written even just above average, so that it allows us to feel something. And outside of a few supporting characters, we didn't get that. So this wound up being a mixed bag for me. At number 14 is Honeydew, which is yet another love it or hate it slow burn horror movie. Now, I think this one was a little better than some of the other films we've gotten this year that fall into this category, but it's far from perfect. It gets the atmosphere down right, and we get a truly unsettling performance from Barbara Kingsley as this eccentric old woman housing our two main characters. But part of the film felt like it was there just to stretch out the runtime, so it lost me a bit in the middle. But I think the third act made up for it. I think in the end, this should have been a short, but what we got was fairly enjoyable overall, though I totally get it if you said you didn't like it. At number 13 is Mafi, one of the year's most uncomfortable watches for me so far. It's a bleak and often brutal watch, playing out like an even more cynical version of the boot camp sequences in Full Metal Jacket. Now, based on a true story, the film's conflict stems from our main character having to repress his homosexuality, while also being forced into this very racist and homophobic military training during the apartheid. and it's not an easy watch to get through. On top of that, the film's emphasis on subtlety might cause some to dismiss it as cold and emotionless. That being said, it's ultimately a film with something meaningful to say, but because of how brutal and uncomfortable it can be, I'd say just proceed with caution here. At number 12 is Bloodthirsty, a minimalistic, slow burn take on the werewolf genre. While the film can feel a bit predictable in some areas, I thought it was engaging for the most part, mainly thanks to the direction from Amelia Moses, as well as 3 solid performances that elevated a lot of the tension. When we do get to the wolf scenes, they are pretty chilling, and while it goes for a slow burn approach, it still does a good job of keeping your interest. It doesn't land a spot higher on this list for me though, mainly because the third act, while being a decent conclusion, comes and goes a bit too quickly, and considering all the build-up, it felt like we should have gotten a lot more. At number 11 is Arlo the Alligator Boy, and everything from here on out I thought was at least good. This Netflix musical serves as the jumping off point for a show set to premiere later in the year, and that's something you need to keep in mind as this will feel a lot more like an extended pilot episode rather than a movie. That being said, it's still a delightful experience, with beautiful 2D animation, colorful characters, and a catchy soundtrack. But I think it's still accessible to adults as well, thanks to its uplifting nature and its cute sense of humor. All in all, it's a nice treat for animation fans. At number 10 is About Endlessness, and I'm going to say, if you're going to check this one out, it is far from your traditional sort of film. Now, I liked it, but director Roy Andersson's style can be very polarizing. There isn't an overarching story here, but rather a series of very brief vignettes that are thematically linked, all done in one static take each. Some are darkly humorous, some are rooted in fantasy, some are somber, but most of them have a sense of existentialism to them. A number of them will definitely resonate emotionally, though I'm going to reiterate, it's not a film for everyone. There's definitely more of an artistic feel to it, and if you're into those sort of films, I think you'll enjoy this. But if you wind up not liking this, I honestly wouldn't be surprised. At the very least, it'll be a film that you'll be able to respect because of the craft on display, even if you don't like the movie itself. At number 9 is The Courier, a very stylish, competently made little spy thriller set in the 60s, based on true events, while also feeling like a throwback to older spy thrillers of that time. Of all Benedict Cumberbatch's non-Marvel performances in the past few years, this is by far my favorite, as this allows him to be very charismatic and lively, and it's a mixture of his performance and the slick, fast-moving narrative that makes this one a worthwhile watch. At number 8 is Rams, a hidden gem from early in the year that I felt like barely anyone talked about. It's a remake of a 2015 film about 2 estranged brothers who separately raise their own sheep and are at war with each other, only to find their careers coming to an abrupt end. The film's anchored by some solid performances, with Sam Neill, as the main brother we follow, being especially effective here, and it mixes some really dark plot points with some sweeter elements regarding family, all while sprinkling in a quirky sense of humor. And while you think all that doesn't mesh well together, I was actually pleasantly surprised to see this maintain a consistent tone for the most part. Definitely give this a shot if you can, as this deserved more attention than it got. At number 7 is Voyagers, a movie that I was honestly expecting to be much lower on this list. This will probably go down as one of the year's most unfairly criticized films, as it received a lot of negative reviews. Now, it definitely did waste a lot of its potential, as it should have been a grand sci-fi epic, but instead it wound up being more of a confined action thriller that focused on a very tiny fraction of a long journey. That being said, what we still got was good, even if it wasn't the film we should have got. The performances were all pretty solid, the film's visually stunning, it does hit some nice themes, and it also does a nice job of gradually building up to a tense, claustrophobic thriller. I completely understand the criticism, but I still think it deserved a little more credit than it got. At number 6 is Stowaway, a small-scale survival thriller set in space. Try saying that 3 times fast. In the vein of Gravity. I've heard people call this one boring or a film where nothing happens, and I gotta disagree there. While it doesn't move at a rapid-fire speed, it does move pretty quickly for a 2-hour movie only centered around 4 characters. And director Joe Penna does a great job of meticulously building up the tension, usually through moments where not much is said. What held it back from going even higher on here, though, is the fact that I thought the way it ends isn't quite as strong as it began. But it's still a really engaging, well-made thriller overall, and I'm definitely looking forward to Joe Penna's next film. At number 5 is Test Pattern, a film that deals with pretty heavy subject matter, not only highlighting sexual assault, but also racial discrimination, though it operates on a less is more notion, with a lot of the tension stemming from things that aren't seen or aren't said. And while stylistic choices like that run the risk of losing your audience a bit, I thought this handled it all incredibly well, giving us a film that's one part character study, one part social commentary, and one part intense thriller. All in all, it's not an easy watch, but if you decide to check it out, it does have something to say, and it might just resonate with you. At number 4 is We Broke Up, a film that I'm probably being a little generous with, because it's far from a perfect movie, but what made it such an absolute joy for me were the two leads. I've become a big fan of both Aya Cash and William Jackson Harper from their respective television careers, and I was very happy to see them both headlining a film together. The plot does have a very sitcom-like setup, but for the most part, it forgoes the sitcom route and actually deals more with two people whose lives are upended at the worst possible time. And a lot of it I actually found to be a lot more realistic than your average rom-com. It's another one of those films that, while it could have done more, what we got was still pretty solid. The performances are kind of what elevates this so high on the list for me, because if these were two different actors, it probably would be lower. And I think for a lot of people, you probably won't love this as much as I did, but I think you still will find it enjoyable. At number 3 is Jacob's Wife, one of the biggest surprises on this list for me. This was especially just refreshing to see, as the last run of new horror releases that I watched right before this were all slow burners that arguably could have been short films rather than features, with little characterization. But this is the total opposite, giving us a very quick-paced film with an engaging story and fully fleshed out lead characters. On top of that, it's very funny. It doesn't play as a total horror comedy trying to evoke a laugh a minute from us, but it does give us a nice balance of genre thrills, solid character arcs, and some sharply written jokes, anchored by two solid performances from Barbara Crampton and Larry Fessenden. Even if vampire movies aren't your thing, make an exception for this. At number 2 is Two of Us. And no, I did not place it here specifically just to say that. It's just that good. It's a February release that I just got around to recently, and I'm so mad at myself for not getting to it sooner. I'm also a little upset that it didn't get nominated for Best International Feature at the Oscars, because this completely deserved it. What starts off as a simple romantic drama turns into this unnerving suspense thriller, almost in the vein of Parasite stylistically. The way it plays into your emotions was so expertly done, especially brought to the forefront by two great lead performances. Now, I was expecting this one to be good walking into it, but the fact I enjoyed it as much as I did made for one of the year's most pleasant surprises for me. Don't sleep on this one any further. But at number 1 is Shiva Baby, an expertly crafted dark comedy that feels like one part Uncut Gems, one part A Serious Man, and one part Rope. It has a very simplistic setup, taking place in one location and in real time, mainly dealing with our lead character getting into a ton of awkward confrontations. But the way the film brilliantly ratchets up the tension is excellent, especially brought to the forefront by some top-notch direction and a chilling horror-like score, bringing out all the anxiety felt by our lead character. And at the film's emotional core are two wonderful lead performances from Rachel Sennett and Molly Gordon, both of whom I hope we see much more of in the near future, along with director Emma Seligman. Filled with a lot of laughs and a lot of anxiety, this coming-of-age dramedy is one you don't want to miss and is my number 1 movie of April. And that's my ranking of April's new releases. We're now a third of the way through the year. Wild, right? While there have been films that didn't totally live up to expectations, I gotta say, there have been quite a few pleasant surprises. And with blockbuster season getting underway, it looks like the fun is only just beginning. But let me know though, what were your favorite movies in April? Was it anything I listed here? Was it something I left off? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching everyone, and keep having fun with film.